I can't see it.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Okay, I'm fine.
Nance, you are live.
All right, we're live. Excellent. Brett, you're opening up, right?
Yeah, there we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our town hall. We're probably still going to have folks that are trickling in over the next couple of minutes, so I will kind of do a little bit of an introduction while others kind of navigate teams and whatnot and get set up. Yeah, so we want to thank you for joining us here today for this town hall. This is the second kind of town hall that we've hosted. Our last one was in January, I believe. And we want to, continue to make this sort of a quarterly type of event where you guys can come in. In this situation, we'll get into the agenda, but on the ASHA side, we're going to do a little bit of a presentation just on some current priorities and whatnot. Really what these town halls are meant to be is an update to our membership on where we're at with some of the priorities, where we're at with some of our initiatives, just general updates, timely updates. In this situation, we also have HRA joining us. So Teresa Seeley, Julie Brewster here. I think we'll have a couple other folks join us from HRA as well. They're going to run through a presentation because we recently went through the annual rule change process and we've got some new rules. So they're going to provide a bit of a presentation. And then what we're going to do at the end, because it's also part of this town hall, is we're going to do a bit of a Q&A. So if you do have questions, you can submit those and we'll do questions at the end once the entire presentation is done. So as a bit of kind of a housekeeping item, so within Teams, you've got the screen open. Up at the top, I think it'll be your top right, you're going to see a Q&A button. If you click that, that is where you can type in your questions and submit them. So if you send in your questions through there, we'll get them, and then we'll try to answer the ones that we can. But again, we'll do that at the end. So as you're seeing the presentation, send your questions, submit your questions, and then we will review and we'll go from there. Last thing to kind of note before we start the presentation is Teams can be a bit of a monster. I know, because I've been hosting training out of Teams for my non-horse day job. And if you're having issues, if the audio is being a little bit strange, or if you're not seeing something on the screen or if something cuts out, the number one solution that I always use with Teams, turn it off and back on again. Leave the meeting, try to come back. If you're using this in a browser, maybe switch a browser. If you're on your phone, maybe go to your computer, vice versa. That's only if you're having trouble. But hopefully, fingers crossed, it's going to be good. This is the first time we're trying out this town hall style presentation. We did a meeting style presentation before where we had some people in person, some people online. This is entirely digital, entirely online. So we're going to give this a try. So yeah, like I said, feel free to send your questions throughout the Q&A. But with that being said, we will get started with our presentation. So I'll turn over to Nancy to kind of kick things off. Oh, Nancy, you're on mute.
I just have to figure out how to advance my slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so thanks, Brett. Just today, we're going to cover off a few things. First, I'll talk a little bit about the annual general meeting. One of our priorities as an association and as an industry in general is developing our handle. So we have some updates on that front. We'll talk about the Century Downs meet and events that we have planned for that meet. And per Brett, we've got Teresa Seeley, we've got Julie Brewster, and a number of folks from Horse Racing Alberta who will also provide you some updates from their perspective. But before we do that, I just wanted to highlight, you may have noticed that ASHA has a new fresh look. We're really excited about this look. ASHA, we do sell a product, and that is standardbred horse racing. And it's always a good idea from a branding perspective to refresh a look, especially in the context of where we're going. I mean, we have a real push to try to attract, a younger demographic, especially that 25 to 50-year-old demographic that has lots of disposable income. So it seemed like a good time to refresh things. We've had a lot of great feedback. You'll also notice that we refreshed our website. So that has been redesigned. And you'll see, the new design permeate, I guess, through the Century Downs meet. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank Tiffany Schwenk and Alana Halliday. These are two new owners in the Calgary area with Nathan Sylvie's stable. And they've been instrumental in connecting us with resources, graphic design resources, and branding resources to help enable this refreshed branding look. And I'll just add that they have both devoted a lot of their time, volunteer time, and helping us, move this forward and really get our look refreshed and help us, really drive standard racing in Alberta. So a big thank you to them. Brett, did you want to add anything? If they're on
Yeah,
the line.
yeah, I'll just throw in, yeah, I echo Nancy's thanks on that front. Um, Marketing in this day and age and our appeal and our visual appeal and all of that, it's important. Yes, there's Century and HRA that do that, but as an association, it's important for us to stay, modern and have a fresh look. That's why the timing was right for this. You'll see later in our presentation as we talk about some of our other opportunities in terms of events, in terms of our partnerships with breweries and whatnot, you know, we're going to be kind of flashing the ASHA logo out a bit more, and kind of showcasing it a little bit. So it was the right time for a bit of a fresher look, and a fresher color palette and all of that. It's kind of the timing was right to do it. So we think it turned out great. And yeah, we hope you enjoy it on your. We handed out a blanket last week. I think Dave Kelly was the winner of that one. So hopefully there'll be a few more with the sire stakes and whatnot. Hopefully you enjoy it, merch wise, but also on your blankets when you win the stakes.
So the annual general meeting, that is coming up very quickly on the 19th. It's taking place at Century Downs, 6 o'clock. And this is my sales pitch to all those folks who are passionate about harness racing in Alberta, who want to make a difference. This is really your opportunity to run for some of these open positions, and make your voice heard. So we'll be running a few elections on the board of directors. We have two, the driver trainer chair rep role, secretary treasurer, a director role, which is 2-year term, and a director role, which is a 1-year term. We also have 3 open positions on the breeders committee. So yeah, if you're at all interested, on our website, we have posted roles and responsibilities for ASHA directors. If you are interested in running or want to learn more, just give me a call or reach out to me by email. We can talk about it. And if you do decide you want to run, then send me a short bio, and we like to get that posted and sent out to membership in advance of the meeting. So this is my sales pitch to encourage all of you members out there to step up and run for one of these open positions. On to handle development. Now, I think Brett probably has some insight into this too, but it's something that it's handle, as far as I'm concerned, is more important than ever. Both Brett and I are represented on Horse Racing Alberta board and have interactions with the ministry. And we know firsthand from the ministry that a handle is a key performance indicator for them. Why is it a key performance indicator? Because from their perspective, it's a reflection of the public support for our support, public's engagement with our supports or with our sport. So it's something that we've been focused on very intently, effectively this last year. We collaborate with Century, HRA, and ASHA on a monthly basis. We review all the data. take a look at, what we're investing in, what's working and what's not, all with a view to really driving that handle both on track as well as off track. So I think, one of the big milestones is that back in November we did the TBG FanDuel. We had a pilot project where we collaborated with TBG FanDuel on a contract where we would get them to actually display some of our racing if it suited their schedule to their audience. And we had them on board for 10 race days in November at the mile. And we saw a significant impact. Our handle increased by 30%. It was pretty clear those races that TBG FanDuel would pick up. You just see, the handle for those races, triple, quadruple. So it really does have an impact. But I think, the big goal with TBG FanDuel is because they're so broad and because the audience is so broad, is to get, the big volume of eyes on our product. It's to increase awareness of Century Racing, so that ultimately over time we start to build a fan base. So I'm happy to report that after that pilot, we've decided to engage TBG FanDuel for the remainder of the season, both at Century Downs and as well as Century Mile. Brett, did you want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, other than just to say, yeah. So to provide a bit more context behind this, like Nancy said, in terms of the government level and their monitoring of the health of our industry, handle is definitely a key performance indicator, right? So that's comes straight from government representatives. That's where they want to look. They want to see an improvement in our handle. They want to see, growth in that area. And so, part of the way to do that is growing our audience. So we've had not, some decent on track handle days, especially when we have events. And so we'll get into that too in terms of our on track events and promotions and whatnot. But export handle and the folks who are off track and tune into our product, that is really one of our top ways to kind of grow, right? The ceiling on that is, there is no ceiling. It really could grow big time. So TBG FanDuel, going into a partnership with them to host our content, to distribute our content, it's huge. And like Nancy said, we did see returns on it in the winter. And we already seen returns. I think last Wednesday we had a pretty good night as well. Now we should see that pick up a little bit. Like our card last night wasn't, super strong in terms of numbers, but more horses starting to get qualified as our cards grow, as our fields grow. That's going to help us, and our handle will grow. So that's a huge thing, and that's going to speak well to, if we can grow our handle and we can show that to the government, that helps us in terms of, continuing to show that we're a growing, stronger industry. So.
Just a few other initiatives. We have a promotional partnership with a group called In the Money. It's a harness players podcast. They promote their picks, chat about our cards on social media, via Facebook, and primarily via Twitter/X. So this really targets, the high value horse player. And it's great just to have that level of exposure. Century Racing has never had that kind of exposure. The Meadowlands is on this, Mohawk is on it, Fraser's been part of it. And so finally now we have Century in the mix. And that really, really helps to get us more exposure again to the really high value horse players. Century has a partnership now with Woodbine Entertainment. So they're supporting Century in terms of content management, in terms of helping us, project and sell our signal. So they not only support selling our signal, but they help us secure better rates, which is great. And then obviously because they run HPI, then that helps us to get a better position on HPI as well. And then finally, we have a partnership relationship with First Content, and they actually take our content and they make it available to a global audience, so non-North America. So it's primarily Europe, some South American countries, New Zealand, Australia. But that's just, again, to expand awareness of our product outside of North America. Anything you want to add, Brad?
Yeah, and sorry, I just want to kind of go back to overall in terms of, that investment in TVG FanDuel. So that is coming out of, for this initial year, there's a strategic investment fund at HRA where, these types of initiatives can be undertaken. And so that is where that decision was made to take it, not just with us, but also with the thoroughbreds, because we feel it's important for Alberta racing as a whole to, okay, we want to step in and be a player. Now, it should be noted, though, that export handle, off-track handle, it's important in that it helps grow your pools and that looks great and everything. Now, live handle still is the premium. That's the one we want. That's the one we get the most money from, the most return on investment from. So we don't want to lose track of that. So these investments in handle in terms of like off track, bringing people in, certainly, that's important. But like we'll cover later on in this presentation in terms of the events and our partnerships with local breweries, that's also to drive live handle. And ideally, you get healthy growth with both. And because you have, it's parimutuel. The higher the pools go, the more people want to play. That's why on Packwood Grand Day, our handle really seems to skyrocket, right? Because we get all that live money that boosts the pools, and then we get a lot of that attention from off track. So it's important not to just focus on one. We focus on both, but that external one that kind of helps, skyrocket it a little bit more, boost it up a bit more. That's where there's this focus. And like I said, it's not just us looking into this. It is the industry as a whole in Alberta with the thoroughbreds. So
Yeah, and yeah, I'll say that, the thoroughbreds have the same thing going with TBG FanDuel. For those who are, want to understand the difference between TBG FanDuel, HPI, and Live, Brett sort of touched on it. The TBG FanDuel and that export handle, it's high volume, lower margin, right? But we need that volume. Like if we can get that volume up, we become much more attractive in terms of the pools. And there's spillover effect into our on-track handle and betting on HPI. So the live track handle is more profitable, certainly. And I'll talk a little bit about our plans to drive that. But I think, we haven't paid good enough attention, in my opinion, to our export handle. And the initiatives you see here are aimed at building that up. But I can't emphasize enough how important it is in terms of spillover effect, right? So if you get that export handle up, you're going to have a spillover effect into your live handle and into the HPI bucket. Excellent. Yeah. So speaking of on-track handle, so again, not that we're ignoring on-track handle. I think they're both very important, but we're serving two very different audiences with two very different purposes. So we need strategies for off-track and we need strategies for on-track. We're not ignoring either one. But you can see, like, I won't go through all of these, but we have, quite an array of events planned throughout the summer, primarily on Saturday afternoons. We know that our on-track handle last year on Saturday afternoons relative to Friday afternoons was roughly 4 or 5 times what it was, right? So Saturday afternoons have been our big day for on-track handle at Century Downs. And we also see a correlation between on-track handle and a lot of these events that we host, right? So, we have the Cinco de Derby, the Kentucky Derby Day, where they have the dog races. I can tell you that it made a big difference last year in terms of our on-track handle. This year on May 31st, we're having a similar event to Harness the Hope, but it's pacing the way for mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Jocelyn Giesbrick has been leading the charge on putting together a mental health awareness equivalent to the Harness the Hope event, which we're really excited about. Also, Packwood Grand, like Brett mentioned, I'll tell you that is our by far biggest day ever for on-track handle. It's an unbelievable day, and we benefit tremendously from a financial perspective from On Track Handle. So it's an important event. And then on August 9th, 8th through 11th, we will, on the Saturday evening, we will have the RCMP musical ride. You know, they come to the province every 4 years. They hosted the ride at Woodbine and other tracks in Ontario. We had really good feedback about it, that it just was an opportunity to expose a broader range of people to our racing and to the track. I would look at the RCMP musical ride as a big opportunity to really expand exposure and get more people exposed to our racing. So did I miss anything, Brett?
Yeah, so this is kind of the full slate. Lots of really good stuff here. I'll also say of particular note, August 16th, that's the UCP fundraiser.
Oh, right.
Last week at the 10th anniversary gala, Nancy and I had a chance to speak with MLA Angela Pitt, and she confirmed at that time. Now, schedules can change, but it does look like Premier Daniel Smith will be in attendance for August 16th. And we really want to take advantage of that. You know, we get the premier at our facility to really showcase harness racing, what it's all about. And that's what um, Angela Pitt, and she's MLA for Airdrie East, I believe, right? And she's pretty close with Danielle Smith. And what she said to us is she wants us to really use that opportunity to show what horse racing is, show what harness racing is, show what we do, and really kind of encapsulate, you know, this sport and its importance and all of that. So, you know, we're going to be prepping for that. We're going to be planning for that. But, you know, expect us to kind of reach out a little bit in terms of, you know, double cart rides. Maybe we'll try to do a double cart race with Premier Smith and that type of thing. But we really want to show a, you know, a really good story. That type of presence with our provincial leadership definitely matters. And so, yeah, we're really looking forward to that. That's August 16th. I know it's still quite a few months away, but some to just particular note I wanted to mention. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because especially, you know, I think we have a huge advantage as standardbreds because, you know, the horses are so accessible. Like they can get so up close and personal, whether it's double cart rides or what have you, or rides in the starting gate. So we really want to, you know, take advantage of just that very natural benefit that we have for engaging newcomers to the sport. And then in the same vein, you know, speaking to on track promotions, again, obviously, I don't know who here was around last. I guess on April 2nd was our first racing night under the lights, which is exciting. You know, Wednesday nights, we believe, is going to be a great off track day. It'll be great for export handle. Certainly, we saw that first night, and we see that off track handle developing because it's a night that isn't as congested as others. So we don't have to compete with Meadowlands. We don't have to compete with Mohawk. So it's a big opportunity. But at the same time, it's evening racing. And certainly as the weather gets better, you know, we're really, really, really trying to push on track attendance as well. And you'll see, you guys, many of you have noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a collaboration ongoing with Born Brewery. Again, Tiffany and Alana have wonderful connections in the Calgary community, especially in the Calgary microbrewery space. They connected Century and ASHA with Born Brewery. We have the Get Lucky premium lager relationship. It's offered $6 a drink on Wednesday evenings. We have free programs Wednesday evenings, free $2 betting voucher for the first 50 people. So we really are trying to push that on track live attendance. And I expect as the weather gets better, it's going to be a little bit easier because it's, you know, we'll have more of a party atmosphere on the tarmac. But we're getting started early, really early on this. And the connection with these microbreweries is really fantastic, mainly because there's such a significant overlap in terms of the target audience. I mean, the target audience we want coming out to our racing is essentially that microbrewery audience, the 25 to 50-year-old. Lots of they have disposable income. They're interested in attending live events, and so you'll notice that we have cross promotions on Instagram. We have a giveaway that's ongoing right now to expand our presence, and Born Brewery promotes our product, and we co-promote our product, so it's really a great way without having to build from scratch to tap into an audience that's already built. And you'll continue to see more race day collaborations with these microbreweries to try to increase on-track attendance. Some of the things we're working on is having buses available at the brewery downtown to bring them out to Century Downs for an afternoon of racing or an evening of racing, that sort of thing. Brett, feel free to add anything if I missed it.
Yeah, I think we've had some questions about if you can buy the beer yourself. I think for right now it's just on track only, but let us know if you want some beer. Maybe we can talk with Tiff and Alana to see if we can get you hooked up with some. And I also want to say, I think Gilles has a forever one up on Logan and Brandon since his is the only face used in this ad. So, he's got that forever to tease him.
Brandon, you see his name here though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Gilles got bragging rights now. Look at that. So no, this is great.
Yeah, exactly. I know that Tiffany is working on making the beer. We have to talk to the partners, but there is an effort to try to make the beer accessible beyond the racetrack, so that's ongoing. And I think from an ASHA perspective, that's all we had for now. Well, Brett, did you want to touch on?
Yeah,
Um,
two items kind of that I think are important to touch on. So one, very briefly, if you're reading in the news, there's a Bill 48. Okay, so essentially, Minister Nally, who oversees the Ministry of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction, which AGLC falls under and Horse Racing Alberta falls under, he's tabled a bill which will likely get enacted into law and become an act, which would see the establishment of a crown corporation, so a government-run corporation for Alberta iGaming, I believe it's what it's called, and essentially, so it would create a company, a crown corporation to regulate and sort of run online gaming in the province. And so this is sort of similar to the Ontario model, which has a crown corporation operating, regulating. Couple reasons for this. One, right now, like you can hop on your phone and you could, put a bet on a sports game, but those those are not regulated by an Alberta body. And when you put a bet on an Oilers game or a Flames game, that money doesn't, go to the province. Unlike, you go to a slot machine, you bet on our racing, all of that, that's province. Right now, it's kind of a bit of a, open market in that regard. So this is the Alberta government coming in to say, no, we're going to regulate it. We want a piece of the action, all of that, which is good in the sense that, now the Alberta government is going to have more of a say and some control over that online gaming. So, but we have been, as HRA representatives and as HRA as a whole, continuing to push behind the scenes to say, okay, if that's the way we're going, that's good. There's going to be, selected partners that can come into Alberta to operate betting platforms, and they will fall under the rules and regulations of this new Crown Corporation and all of that. However, we want to be featured. We want to be featured our own Alberta product, the ability to bet on horses within that, those gaming apps, those online gaming apps, because it is competition for us. And having it be Alberta run with support of the government of Alberta behind it does give a bit more power to say, okay, if you're going to operate here, we want to have, horse racing represented on this platform. So that's a continued push from us on the HRA side of things to make sure that that does happen. But if you are reading about it, it's Bill 48. You can look up, there's some news articles about it. It was recently went for the first reading and discussion and debate in the House. It probably will get passed into law, into an act, and there will be the establishment of that Crown Corporation.
Can I just add
Yeah,
a couple of things? Yeah, so I think from an HRA perspective, an industry perspective, it is an absolute priority that we get horse racing represented in the sports betting landscape on these online sports betting. Um, for those of you who don't know, there's only one legal sports betting app in Alberta. It's Play Alberta. It's been in existence since 2020, I believe. And they've captured about 45% of that market. The other 55% is what they call the gray, the not, I guess it's gray market area. It's not considered, I guess, legal online sports betting. And that's kind of the genesis of this, or the rationale for this particular bill is for Alberta in a controlled environment to capture the other 55% of that market. But in terms of our priority, the first thing is, and there's lots of conversations, lots of discussions ongoing in the background, but the first thing we need is to get represented on Play Alberta. We need horse racing to get onto Play Alberta. That's kind of the first stepping stone, because it's really critical, I believe, for our future, that we have access to that gambling market. So it's a priority.
For sure. And then the last thing before we hand it over to HRA, in terms of that stabling in between our meets from Century Down, Century Mile, we are working on that. We're working with Olds and a couple other options. Our plan, we want to get some information about that out, I would say this month, so that we've got lots of time to plan. Stabling is at a premium right now. It's probably going to be even more of a premium if we get the uptick from BC that we're expecting. So it's a good problem to have, but stabling is a priority in terms of not just for that transition period, but honestly, just in general. So we're working on it behind the scenes. We will have some more information to share this month. And before we turn it over to HRA, if you joined late, we are recording this presentation, so we'll be sending it out via email after for anyone that wants to view it. And as we said at the start, if you do have any questions as we kind of on anything we've presented so far or anything that HRA is about to present, you can use that Q&A feature up at the top and send in your questions, and we'll do a short little Q&A at the end if we do have any questions. So I think with that, Nancy, we could probably turn it over to HRA.
You betcha. I'm going to hand it over to you, Teresa.
Great. Thank you, guys. Kudos to you guys for having a forum like this, for an opportunity to share with your members, to be able to join from anywhere. This is great. And thank you so much for the opportunity for us to get in front of you and talk about what's coming and kind of try to get some more communication out there. That's something that Chuck and I talk about quite a bit, and something that I know we've been under fire on is lack of communication to industry. So we're really trying to get out there and get the information out to you guys as quickly as we can. So before we start, just Julie has a few words that she would like to say. And I'm going to present our slideshow here.
Just tell me when to advance them, Teresa.
Just tell you when to advance? Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's what we'll do.
All right, so I want to thank everybody who helped us out for our Olds College groom students. Just to start with, so our students, our groom students were able to go to Jacques and Julie Lambert's place, and then Nathan and Sobe Racing Stable and Don Muckman and Shelley Arsenault took students, and I can't thank you enough. It was really fantastic to get students exposed to the harness racing world, so thank you for that. We have some really big news coming, but it won't be coming until June the 1st. So Horse Racing Alberta, the board last week passed a new benefits program that we'll be rolling out. We can't release any details yet because it has to go to the provider, and we have to pay those first month of premiums and make sure everything's nailed down. And then the communications team will roll it out. But I can tell you that it's going to be really, really fantastic. It's going to be accessible for licensees for all 3 breeds at all 5 racetracks, and we're finally going to see some parity between the different breeds, and I think it's going to be a really, really welcome benefits plan. So that's what I've got about that.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's something a little more substantial than for sure happened before.
Yeah.
So moving on to our first slide is the Horse Racing Alberta text line. I know a lot of you have already signed up for this. We can't add you automatically, so we need you to actually register. And we're sending out texts whenever there's something new, something you guys need to know really quickly, a reminder of what's to come, updates that are coming up. So something we'll share will be these directives and rules once they become gazetted, and we'll share that with you guys to be able to see any notifications that we have from Horse Racing Alberta on the regulatory side to get to you, or even emergencies, that there's something coming, that maybe there's some kind of an outbreak or something like that. So we really encourage you to sign up for it, and contacting Debbie at the number there, 587-416-5461, or emailing Debbie with your name and phone number, your text number that you'd like to use would be very helpful. So if you want to get in the know, please sign up for the text line. Okay. Next, Nancy, please.
There you go.
Something we want to revisit as well, and we've had, some skepticism about the report it line and so on. Please don't be afraid to use it. We seriously cannot see who sends us the texts. That's what, if you Google the Report It app online, it's not just our app, it's an app that's used all over North America for these type of things. And it really is anonymous. If you want to send it anonymously, or if you want to send it in with your name, that's fine too. And don't call it only a rat line, which I've heard time and again. That's not what it's intent to be, though it can be. But it includes things like if you have something that needs to be repaired in your barn and you're not getting any help from your racetrack to get it done, take a picture, put it onto the Report It, and we will send it to Century Mile or Century Downs, and they actually have to act on it. It's part of our licensing agreement with those tracks. So it could be, you have a horse that come back running down, you have a high incidence of horses running down, or anything like that you would like to report to us of what's happening, what do we need to be aware of. So we really don't want to lose this, which is what's going to happen if we don't use it more. So I encourage you guys to use this Report It app, download it onto your phone, and use it in those ways that would be helpful to you. Okay. Don't just think of it as a rat line. There could be all kinds of safety issues, things like that. When I was there a couple of weeks ago, there was stalls that needed to be fixed, and they said, well, we've asked for them to be fixed and nobody's come over. If you take a picture, Chuck and I automatically get it on our phones, and we'll send it to Alan, who will follow up and make sure it gets done. So give us an opportunity, give us the chance to make this work. And so if you see there's that QR code also at the track, our security guards have little cards that they're carrying around with them with how to get on to Report It. If you're struggling and you're not too sure how to make it happen, once you get signed in the first time, it's permanently on your phone. So get Misty to help you, or Roy, or if you see me, I'll be happy to help you to get that on your phone so you can use it. Next slide, Nancy. So this is where the fun starts, and we get to talk about rules. You guys had such a fantastic presentation, and you have some really positive stuff coming, and here we get to talk about rules. So I'm going to hand this over to Chuck, because we're going to take turns in presenting some of what's coming. So Chuck.
Muted.
You muted, Chuck.
There, I forget to unquiet myself. As Nancy and Brett can attest to, being at board meetings and how much these rules are hashed back and forth and stuff, and it's a long process. We start in October, and we're just finishing it up now for it to be gazetted. So literally hundreds of hours go into it with our staff. So every rule petition gets looked at. Whether it gets moved forward by the licensing committee as a recommendation to be accepted is another story. But they all are looked at, and we have to build the language around every rule just in case it is going to go forward. So, there's a ton of work. So the first one dealt with, and there was a lot of discussion with dogs in the backstretch. And I can tell you that the biggest thing that came out of the dogs in the backstretch was the overall feeling was that they did not want dogs in the backstretch. Now, there is going to be allowed to be dogs in the backstretch, but only under certain circumstances. And that is that for people that are residing on the track, like at the mile, they can have their dog. Okay. I think, Tracy, do you want me to read through what each of the conditions on each of these are, or can Nancy put them up? Yeah, so
I
as
don't
you
know.
can,
I think it would be helpful to our audience to talk
sure.
about each one and
Yeah, because I'm not
some
sure
of
if
the
some
special
are in by
circumstances.
phone. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not sure if some are in by phone here, Brett. So, but in any event, dogs are permitted in the backstretch, but only for individuals that are residing at the track. So that's the mile. They're strictly prohibited from entering the barns under any circumstances. No dogs are to be walked during training or racing hours. Uh, all dogs must also be on a leash while on the property. Owners must maintain full control of their dogs to prevent any incidents. Only vaccinated and healthy dogs shall be permitted there, and owners must take responsibility to ensure they properly clean up after their dog, and the dog's behavior must not be disruptive to the horses, the drivers, riders, or any other workers that are there. Now, this kind of was
Next slide,
major.
Nancy, please.
So, yeah, so the next part is service dogs that are qualified under the Government of Alberta Service Dogs Act and possess a valid Government of Alberta service certificate. They are allowed. Okay, so but they must have that certification. Dog identification cards are permitted access to all horse racing Alberta licensed racetracks. Handlers must present this identification upon request and ensure the service dog is under control at all times. So that stands in line with the way the rest of the world is. If it's a service dog, it's permitted. And this was kind of just to give you background, this was a bit of a back and forth with the racetrack, and they said we can meet this halfway, but we'll lose it for sure if people don't clean up after their dogs. So it's the old story. If you're going to abuse it, you will lose it. So this was what we did get as a partial win on having any dogs in the backstretch was under these circumstances. So that deals with that rule change.
Bye. Shockwave therapy is also Chuck's.
Okay, shockwave therapy. There are some changes to shockwave therapy. There was a suggestion, there was a petition that wanted to move it from 10 days to 4 days. That didn't get approved at all. Our commission vet was not in favor of it. I think I'll just leave it at that though, but I'll get into what the changes are. So on shockwave therapy now, no person other than a licensed veterinarian may possess or use an extracorporeal shockwave therapy machine or a radial pulse wave therapy machine on any racehorse. Okay, so it has to be a veterinarian. It can't be anybody owning their own machine. So if somebody's found in possession of one, we would seize it, and we would be taking action against that person for doing so. At the beginning of each calendar year, practicing veterinarians licensed by Horse Racing Alberta who possess or use an extracorporeal shockwave therapy machine or a radial pulse wave therapy machine must register their machines with Horse Racing Alberta as approved by the official veterinarian. Next slide. The rest of this, again, the usage of it is pretty plain there. It says the use of the shockwave therapy machine or radio pulse on a racehorse must be reported within 24 hours of treatment on the prescribed form and forwarded to the official veterinarian. Any treated horse is not permitted to race, breeze, or train for a minimum of 10 days following treatment. Now, in the standardbreds, it's a little bit different. There we acknowledge that they're allowed to jog. Okay, they can go out on a slow jog type thing because you don't use hot walkers, but they can go out and they can still be exercised. What they don't want you doing is going fast training miles with these horses. Any treated horse, as I say, is not permitted for 10 days to race, breeze, or train. Any horse treated with shockwave therapy is to be added to a list of ineligible horses until that 10 days is up. The list is to be kept in the race office and accessible to all racing participants during normal business hours and be made available to other regulatory jurisdictions. So now as we get reports coming in, and we are getting them coming in, where people have used shockwave therapy on a horse, the race office gets it. They know for 10 days that horse can't go in the box. So just a heads up on that. Any horse, this is a new part of it, any horse treated by a licensed Alberta Veterinary Medical Association veterinarian other than a veterinarian licensed by Horse Racing Alberta must be reported by the owner or trainer to the official veterinarian. So that's an honesty thing. And the onus is upon the owner or trainer to say, hey, I had my local vet do shockwave therapy on my horse, and everything, all the conditions apply. A horse that receives any such treatment without full compliance with this section in any other jurisdiction is to be placed on the judges or stewards list. Okay. The reason for that is a horse could be coming from BC, for example, and had shockwave therapy 3 days ago, and they have to declare it. Okay. If we find out they don't declare it, then that's something that we have to deal with. Okay. So those are that's the changes on shockwave therapy that are pertinent to you. So
Next slide.
Chuck, it's
oh,
Nancy.
sorry.
It's Nancy. Can I just,
Sure.
can you speak to the rationale behind this 10 days and why it's so important and what we're trying to prevent, basically?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to prevent is certainly we all know that there's good usage for shockwave therapy. But we also know that if it's not used the right way, it is the feeling of practitioners in a lot of North American jurisdictions that horses will race right through their pain, and it could lead to catastrophic breakdowns. And that's what our biggest concern is we need to bring our catastrophic breakdowns, the numbers down significantly. As Nancy and Brett are well aware of, horse racing is scrutinized so badly now and in the news for all those wrong reasons, for catastrophic breakdowns type thing. So we didn't feel there was a good case for moving it into a closer 4-day thing. We want to have people to be able to use it, but use it in the right way. And we don't want to use it in a way where a horse will race or train through its pain and maybe break down. So that was the rationale. It was the feeling of our commissioned veterinarian. It was strongly supported as well by the board that we don't adjust that from 10 days to 4 days, but that's pretty much the rationale behind it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Prohibited blood alcohol concentrations. This one's pretty straightforward, something that we've been mostly following all along. We wanted to make sure that it went into the rules and that everybody understood what it was. So when we ask somebody to breathalyze, if the blood alcohol concentration exceeds that 50 milligrams of alcohol in 100 liters of blood, a second test will be administered. So if you blow 50 or better, we have you stay in the room. Our security investigators have to keep an eye on you at that time. You can't leave. And in 20 minutes, or more, we will retest you again and then take an average of those tests. So if you've significantly come down, you could still be in the good parameters under that 50 to be able to go to work. So that's what that's describing there. And that's pretty, the police services use this, they use this at other tracks. And so we wanted to make sure that that came forward for you guys as well. Next slide. That's you, Chuck.
Yep, that's the pylon rule. And I think where this one comes in for everybody, as you know, it really applies to Century Downs with the passing lane. And it's just very specific to deal with the fact that we didn't have any rule or anything in our rule book dealing with the passing lane at Century Downs. So if you go to the extended passing lane on page 2, Nancy, it'll give you kind of what we're looking for in number 4.
Which one is it? I don't know.
Should be, yeah, there's
Only
more
got
than
this
one page.
Yeah, I only got this one. Sorry.
Okay, I'll read it out, but here's what it basically says, that it just sets some rules for using that passing lane. It says no horse shall pass on the extended passing lane entering the home stretch for the first time during the race. Of course, that makes common sense, but it's applicable to put it there. The lead horse in the home stretch shall maintain as straight a course as possible while allowing training horses full and unobstructed access to the extended passing lane. Horses using the extended passing lane must have complete clearance to enter and use that lane. Okay, so and the fourth part of that is D. Drivers who, in the opinion of the Board of Judges, violates any of the above when not forced to do so as a result of another driver and or horse may be subject to being placed monetary penalty or suspension. So that's what that one's about, is just to put some something in place talking about the passing lane at Century Downs. Okay, because there was nothing there before.
Slide, Nancy.
You got it.
Okay. So the next rule speaks to equine infectious anemia. So we had a policy on this most of the year last year. And this comes from having that positive test for equine infectious anemia in Winnipeg that disrupted horses being able to come and go at tracks. And so our Rules and Regulatory Committee was very concerned that there is horses coming onto the properties of racetracks in Alberta without having a negative Coggins. So that is what happened in Winnipeg. Horse came onto the grounds without any negative Coggins. It ended up being positive. And once I get through this rule, we'll just talk to you a little bit about why that's such a big deal. So the rule states any person responsible for a horse stabled at a Horse Racing Alberta licensed racetrack must provide proof of negative equine infectious anemia or Coggins test. The test must be dated within the last 12 months or 365 days and submitted at least 48 hours before admittance to the racetrack. Proof of the negative test must be reported to Horse Racing Alberta Security. And then the policy talks about all of the requirements. Again, that has been out for quite some time. A horse subject of a positive test for equine infectious anemia will be reported to its trainer or other person in charge of that horse by the CFIA. So that doesn't come from us. Once they get a positive, the CFIA comes, they're in charge now of the racetrack. The CFIA will place a precautionary quarantine on all equines on the premises of the racetrack with documentation outlining the rules of the quarantine. Next slide. So what is equine infectious anemia? So Nancy asked me again to put this a little bit of information together that I used even for our regulatory team to explain what it is. It's called is it
Sorry.
advancing on its own?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay.
EIA is caused by a virus that affects equids, right? So horses, donkeys, and so on. There's been 190 EIA cases reported across Western Canada. The virus that causes EIA is transmitted by bites from biting flies, contaminated reuse of hypodermic needles, syringes, basically anything that has blood, whether it be like a horsefly or your equipment in your track or on your farm, is transmitted that way. Next slide. So there is no vaccine or treatment for equine infectious anemia. The best way to protect our horses in Alberta horse racing is through regular Coggins testing and biosecurity. Did you know Alberta is a hotbed for cases of equine infectious anemia? We have the highest, if you look in that chart with the blue lines, we have the highest number of equine infectious anemia cases is in Alberta. Next slide, Nancy. So what happens if we do have a positive case of a horse on a Racing Alberta track? So automatically CFIA would take over. It would be an immediate quarantine and there's no horses in or out. Positive horses will be euthanized. Testing of all horses on the premises and further positive horses would be euthanized. Temporary suspension of activities. So you could see why the Regulatory and Licensing Committee was very concerned about us getting a positive. I mean, we might go on forever without one, but what happened in Winnipeg could happen here quite easily if we don't have our negative Coggins before they come onto the property. Next slide. So preventing equine infectious anemia from entering our racetracks is the best form of protection. So what do we need to do? What do you guys need to do? We've put together the simplest form that we could find for an application to ship in. So you send in that you're going to coming up, even if it's a little bit more advanced of the 48 hours. We can check your horses on Track It, or you can send us your current Coggins that you have. It can be submitted right through that form. So we're going to ensure that you have a negative Coggins before you come onto the grounds. Now, probably something you've not heard of is we have had trainers and owners apply to come in and their horse actually doesn't have a negative Coggins. So we ask them to not ship that horse in until they get the blood pulled and submit that paperwork to us. So when we have that 48 hour ship in application, we've now saved you $250 because that is the fine for bringing a horse onto the grounds without a negative Coggins on file, a current negative Coggins. If your Coggins laxes while you are on the track, it'll cost you $100 per horse. Next slide. So what can we do to protect our horses from equine infectious anemia? Test your horses on your property, test your horses before moving into the track, and I make sure horses are tested before they come onto your property, especially if you have a boarding stable. Try to eliminate biting insects from your barn. So here we've got somebody spraying a horse with some fly spray. A lot of you guys on farms, use smudges and so on. Keeping your horse in during the evening will sometimes, keep those bugs from getting at your horses. It's called swamp fever for a reason. So if we have a really wet wet spring, or early in the spring when we have a lot of wet and mosquitoes start to hatch and other flies start to come about, that's where you can really have that incidence of transmission. Next slide. So for a complete copy of the equine infectious anemia policy, You can always email security at the horses. If you go to any of our racetracks, they'll be able to offer it from in our Horse Racing Alberta office. Security should be able to print that off for you if you'd like to see it, and have that information for you. Next slide. Okay, so that's mine as well, equine welfare. So there's a new rule that come out this year that was approved by the committee. No licensee, it's about equine welfare. So how the horses are managed, how they're handled, how they're treated. No licensee acting alone or in concert with another person shall compromise the welfare of a horse for competitive or commercial reasons, or subject or permit any horse under the control, custody, or supervision to be subjected to to incur the following: any form of cruelty, mistreatment, neglect, or abuse, abandonment, injury, maiming, or killing, except for euthanasia for humane reasons, administration of noxious substance, or deprivation of necessary care, sustenance, shelter, or veterinary care. Next slide.
Sorry, coming. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, did I get it right? Sorry.
Yes. If the judges or stewards board, under the recommendation of the official veterinarian, are satisfied that a racing participant has failed to meet the health and welfare needs of horses, the judges and stewards board may assign financial penalties, refuse entries to horse races, and or ban, suspend, or apply conditions to the license of the licensee. Okay. This kind of goes into what you guys were speaking of earlier in our the public, and watching our races and making sure we have the right product going in front of public. It's kind of telling that we didn't have a rule on equine welfare in our rule book anywhere, and now that's become one of the number one concerns at racetracks across the country. So this is just something to be aware of. And now we actually have something that we can work with in our rules to deal with these type of things. New slide. So this is you, Chuck.
This is the new ship-in rule, and it two parts here that nothing changed for the thoroughbreds, but what did change is for the standardbreds. And that's going to be that a standardbred horse entered a race at any racetrack in Alberta must arrive at the racetrack no later than 2 hours. So instead of the 4 hours and 15 minutes, now it's 2 hours in advance of the published time for the first race. So that's a significant change for you. What doesn't change is if you're a Lasix horse. If you were in the first race, then you're still 4.25 hours ahead of that first race for your Lasix. So that part didn't change. So the board did recognize the fact that a lot of standardbreds are not all being housed at the racetrack now because there's just not enough stalls for everybody. So that will be a change. Now I want, unless somebody's got a question on that, I'm just going to talk about these rules in general. In general, what happens now, because Brett and Nancy have both asked me, as these rules now, and Teresa talked to you about gazetted, what that means is we're done with the rules from the regulatory side, and we now send it to the Alberta Gazette. The Alberta Gazette is a publication of government documents and stuff, and these rules will all get published there. Okay, because it's all under the Horse Racing Alberta Act that must be gazetted, and that's what we come up with the term gazetted. And once they're in the Alberta Gazette, I can then put these rules all into action. That usually takes us somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks from the time we send it to the Gazette and they get it published. So the only thing I can tell you is as soon as we do know it's published, we will move on these rules very quickly to put them into place, and I'll be advising ASHA as far as the ship-in change. So all I can say is we're now at the mercy of the Alberta Gazette, so we just have to wait till that part is done. Questions? Anybody got any questions regarding that part of it?
Next slide, you can, and then that's it.
That's it.
I think we could probably, because I've received some questions from some members about that ship-in rule and the medication rule not coming down with it. So we should probably speak to that as well. So this was a heavy discussion in terms of why those aren't in sync. So there was a request made, to see if the ship-in rule with the reduction to 2 hours, if the medication rule could come down to 2 hours. But as Chuck kind of spoke to, in terms of the HRA board and the public and whatnot, there was no appetite to move the medication rule down. So in fact, that medication rule, there's a chance it could go up, essentially, I would say. Like, for example, Ontario, I believe, is the 1 hour ship-in rule before your post time, but then the 12-hour medication rule. So whenever there's these types of discussions, it's, well, okay, balancing both. If you've lived the ship-in lifestyle, that 4 hour and a quarter can be extreme, especially if you're in a later race and whatnot, you're showing up 4 hours before. If you're traveling from one of our major centers to another, so Edmonton to Calgary, Calgary to Edmonton, vice versa, you're on the road very early if it's day racing, or you're up very late and then you're back on the road again. So that 4 hour and a quarter, it was detrimental in a lot of ways. I think to the membership that ship in, it's a tough lifestyle. It's costly because it takes you further away from your farm, so you're having to hire more help if you're stabling off. And also just in terms of life, it's more time spent away from family and whatnot. So that ship-in lifestyle, especially relative to other jurisdictions, is a tough sell. It's difficult with the 4 and a quarter hours. So there was a hunger there from our membership to reduce it, especially too because there was testing done, no positives coming back. Okay, so now there was the case to be made that we could look at reducing it to 2 hours. To me, it's still not like the Ontario, but it's a bit more palatable, and those 2 hours do add up. The other thing to consider as well is there is right now we race 2 days a week, 8 days racing. And when we get into Lacombe for that month and a half or so, we race 3 days a week. Well, we want to get up to 3 8 days a week, which could mean that there's going to be a future where we're at 4 days a week racing. So 4 and a quarter hours shipping in 4 times a week, that's a lot of extra time spent sitting around waiting. Not feasible. So now is the time where there was support at the HRA board level to reduce that ship-in time. And that was the decision made to go forward with taking that reduction while we could, because going forward, we might not get that opportunity again. And if we go to, a world where we are racing 3 4 days a week, we want to make sure that our membership has that work-life balance, and then we're not burning people out, putting them in dangerous conditions on the road, all of that. So we recognize that medication rule may not sync with the ship-in rule, but there's a chance that in the future it's not going to sync anyways, because it might go up to 12 hours like Ontario, and we could never get to a world where we're shipping in 12 hours. I mean, it would just be completely unfeasible. So it's a change, but when you're looking at these types of decisions, it's kind of all factors considered, and that sort of is why there's that discrepancy there. So I don't know if Chuck, if there's anything you want to add on that front.
Yeah, I would just add that the 2 hour window also gives us an opportunity to, when the horses arrive, for the trainer to get unloaded, get his horses into a stall. And if he's the driver, we need that little bit of time to breathalyze him. If he's in a first race, for example, we need that time to breathalyze or dragger or whatever else we might do. So, you know, it would have been too complicated and too costly to turn it to 1 hour from the published race you're in. So you're in the 10th race, you don't arrive until an hour before that. And the cost for all the extra manpower uh, to do what we need to do and check those horses in and everything else, it would have been too exorbitant at this stage. So that's why the 2 hours is there. It allows us that period of time for Teresa's security people to do what they need to do as well.
Awesome. We did have another question that came in a little bit earlier. This was in regards to the shockwave therapy. And I could take a first crack at it and then
Sure.
hand it over to you, Chuck. So it says, you know, do you think that people, because now with this change, it's, you know, only Horse Racing Alberta licensed vets, only licensed vets can have shockwave therapy machines. So, you know, if you're a regular trainer, you can't own one. And if you do seek shockwave therapy from a non-HRA vet, that you have to, you know, inform Horse Racing Alberta. And the
Yeah.
question is, well, do you think people are going to tell you? And I guess I'd say, you know, we hope we do. When you make initiatives like this, you know, it's could be easy to say, well, you know, someone might not just tell me, but that's not why you put in these types of rules in place. You know, if someone didn't have registration on their vehicle, you know, it's not like, oh, people are still going to drive anyways, so we won't make it a requirement to do that or to have a driver's license. You put those in place so that, because if it's valued against the safety of equine safety and public license in order to operate horse racing, so the rule aligns with those things. So you put something in place so that if there is a violation, it can be held against that, right? If you don't have any rules in place, then you don't, you know, you've got nothing to stick to. So that is, even if you think, well, someone might not say, okay, but if they don't follow that procedure, then there is at least a rule to hold them against, right? So I don't know, Chuck, if
Yes.
that.
And that's partly true. I mean, we're starting to be a jurisdiction that other jurisdictions are starting to follow, especially in Western Canada and the things that we do. And I like to use that example of a horse coming from BC. If BC adopts a similar type rule that it's supposed to be reported and a horse comes over here, then we would have knowledge, and that's the responsibility of that trainer and driver to tell us. Because if we check with BC and found out the horse had shockwave therapy and they haven't declared it, now we have an issue. And right now, Dr. Gibson and I have had brief chat about uh, possibly even reaching out to the Alberta Veterinary Medical Association with you know, a request that if a private practitioner treats a racehorse, that they would apprise us of it. Nothing says they will, but I can tell you that our practicing veterinarians right now at the track are being very cooperative with us, and that's great. And like I said, you know, we can debate whether, when, and where it can be used, and I know I've used it myself, and I know the benefits of it. But a lot of the time, it's like anything else. If we abuse it, we lose it. And if we have people that have their own machines, we, you know, that's where it can be a problem. You know, it can be used in such a way that a horse can race right through that pain, and next thing you know, we've got a horse down and we've got a catastrophic injury. And that's what we don't want. We want to stay away from the public having to see a catastrophic injury of a horse on the track. So it's not a matter that we don't realize it's therapeutic. We certainly do. But we think by staying to the 10 days, it allows that treatment to take place. The animal still has its ability to react to it on its own and recognize its own pain as well. So that's kind of where it was at. And Nancy, you and Brett both understood there that, you know, that's a big thing for the industry right now, and is these catastrophic injuries. And I would like to get us down to half of what we are right now. And, you know, I can't do that though without the help of the industry. And so that's why it's so important that the, people within the industry have to keep the animals' welfare first and foremost, in mind, and we protect the animal in that sense.
And yeah, Chuck and Brett both mentioned equine safety, equine welfare, and it's just a reality that we're facing that, in order to have the public support for what we do, it has to be, it must be a priority. So that's often, the first layer of that's spoken to when we're making these types of decisions. And if you have it's a small world with the internet, obviously, and social media, but there is a great deal of concern in horse racing circles about medicating or shockwave therapy too close to intense competition, especially if it's numbing pain, because there is evidence to suggest that that can lead to catastrophic injury. They do a lot of studies. HISA, HIWU are pretty intense in the United States. So, I know there was a desire to harmonize the ship in time with the medication rule, but and it's a non-starter to send a message that we think it's okay to medicate within 2 hours of a horse racing event. That is not palatable for the industry. It's not palatable for the public, and it's really about equine safety.
Yeah. And following up on that, we did get a follow-up is that, with Ontario, everyone ships in. And certainly that is a different, like us racing in Alberta, I mean, it's even changed so much from back when we were racing at Northland Stampede where, so many people are on track. Now it's more of this balanced mix. And so it does make it a little bit trickier trying to manage, the needs and whatnot of both. But I think in terms of, like we said, from the public perception and trust me, that public perception and whatnot does drive a lot at HRA. So don't be surprised. I mean, that medication rule could go up in the future. So that is where it was, in terms of trying to balance it. Ontario's medication rule and shipping rule don't align. But again, everyone ships in. Here it's a different story. But I think the idea is that, okay, but we know who's shipping in. If there were concerns about, if someone was medicating after that 4-hour rule, who's shipping in. If you're coming from one of the major metropolitans, that would pretty much have to mean you're stopping on the highway. Or if there were concerns about, medicating right before getting on the trip, this type of thing, that is where the HRA regulatory in terms of monitoring, surveillance, that types of thing come into effect, right? In theory, even at the track, under that 4.25 hour, if someone really wants to, they could try, right? So that is where, in terms of monitoring, surveillance, and whatnot, that is where we lean on our regulatory counterparts to help ensure that. But at the same time, acknowledging that people still do have to make a living at this, and we have to acknowledge that there are, at the mile this year, we had people sleeping in the shed rows and whatnot because that burnout of, racing late, going back home, having to be back 4 hours earlier, it was tough. And like we said, going to a model where we're going to be racing 3-4 days a week, we wanted to make sure that we do still have that balance so that we can even attract new people to come here. And we think that'll do it. So, or help contribute to it. Chuck, if there's anything you wanted to add on that, or Nancy, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say about the shock wave therapy. So the big change, Chuck, is that no one except for a licensed vet can own a machine, correct?
Nobody can possess one.
Oh, okay.
Nobody other than a licensed veterinarian. It doesn't have to be necessarily our commissioned veterinarians. Or when I say commission,
Okay.
any veterinarian licensed by Horse Racing Alberta. This is, another practitioner that doesn't practice at the track could be using this. And as I say, we're trying to explore an idea there that maybe we can get the ABVAMA there to on board to say, hey, yeah, we understand what you're trying to do, and if we do a shockwave on a racehorse, we will advise you. We can't guarantee that's going to happen, but to answer your question, Nancy, yeah, it used to be if somebody had a shockwave therapy machine, unless we caught them doing anything with it, we really couldn't do anything. And now it's a rule. If we find somebody in position, if there's somebody's got one in their barn, or we happen to do an inspection of a horse trailer or whatever, and there's one there, we're going to seize it and they're going to get fined. So in other words, we're trying to make sure it stays in the hands of a practitioner.
Okay. I going through our questions. I think we've covered the other ones to Ontario and that, so I think that's covered. We did get a comment about the track, and I mean, I other than just to say like we are aware, like we're working through some things on in terms of the quality of the track and whatnot. So I don't know, in terms of touching on it more, like we understand it was not the greatest. Like it seems like it's a every year type of thing. We're aware. I don't know, Nancy, if there's anything else you want to add to that in terms of specifics, but
If I can just interject
oh,
there,
here, Chuck,
you
yeah.
guys
Go ahead, Chuck.
both, yeah, you guys both, you know, you're well aware of the, you know, our various subcommittees and stuff now, and now when we're revisiting the racetrack licensing rules, there's things, for example, in the past we have identified through Teresa doing her inspections with OH&S and stuff that we would identify and nothing would happen about it. And that's the thing that's coming in now, that now when we identify these problems, uh, they have to be fixed. And the first thing that occurs is they get a copy of the report. Things are identified, and then if they're not fixed, they get a letter. That's the first thing they get, is a letter saying you must fix this within a set period of time, uh, or respond. They must respond to the letter within a set period of time, and then in that they have to set out when they're going to fix the problem. So in the past, we've never been able to ever sanction in any way by fine or anything else with a racetrack. And now we'll be able to deal with these things. And I would say that, you know, from the regulatory side, I see a very good buy-in on this through Century. So I think our A tracks are certainly on board with what's trying to be achieved here. But we've never had that, and that's the point, was we've never been able to do anything about it other than say, can you do something about this? And Teresa would spend hours and travel and stuff doing these inspections and stuff and hand in the reports, and poof, they went out into nowhere land. Now, not anymore. That as soon as that, as you guys know, they're working on those racetrack licensing rules. Once that's passed by the board along with the penalty matrix that goes with it, then action can be taken. So for a change, we now have some clout. And yeah, I knew about the track. It was my understanding they'd added a fair bit of sand, so it was a fairly tiring track last night, and that's why there was a variant of 2 on the track. So I'm sure they'll work to fix that, and the answer is going to be, you know, to blend their clay and stuff back into it. So, but you're right, Brett. There was some things that I question why we waited so long, for example, for that surface to be put down leading up to race time. Um,
Yeah.
you know, there's some other things I think we could also look at, and you guys could request. For example, maybe you should request that you might want qualifiers on Wednesday and Saturday.
We have.
You know,
But
and
We've done that.
so and it, from my standpoint, it makes sense. From the tracks, maybe it doesn't, because it's an added expense to keep their people there an hour earlier or an hour later. But you know, to me, it should be a no-brainer. You know, instead of having 10 races on a Saturday, maybe we have 5 on a Wednesday, 5 on a Saturday, type thing. So that's something I'll discuss a little more with Alan, that you know, especially as we get uh, starting to qualify a lot more horses.
Yeah, we've been having those conversations. So any help you can provide in terms of twisting arms there would be appreciated. But
Yeah,
just I wanted to
I
build
will
on
say,
what
Nancy,
yeah.
they've been pretty good in working with
Hmm.
us. And so when you have those kind of requests, I would just say, bring me into the fold and I can, if I can help out, I will. I mean, ultimately, it becomes the decision of the track when they do these things. But if it makes sense, then I think we just got to sell the idea, better,
Yeah.
type thing. So, uh,
And
but I do question some of the things that take place, and I don't put this all on Alan Goodsell's shoulders by any stretch of the imagination. He's kind of he has to do things as uh, direction that comes from above him when projects get done.
Mhm.
And so I want to have that conversation though of why the surface was so late going down.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
me, that shouldn't have happened. We had a good month of good weather before that we could have started to put that surface down, have all the clay and stuff in place and be ready to go.
Yeah, I was just
So
gonna add, sorry, Chuck, I was gonna add to that. Next week we have a track safety, one of the committee meetings. I'm on that committee, as is Jamie Gray.
yes,
And we did have this conversation at the HRA board meeting, and then after the HRA board meeting with various members. And so the next step really is to bring that very question to that committee. I mean, we can't fix the past, but we can certainly make sure it doesn't happen again, because it seems that the biggest issue contributing to the track challenges we're having right now is the fact that their turnover process and when they started that process. We
yeah,
believe it was late. We need a protocol that helps us avoid that situation moving forward.
and I think
and
we
like
can work towards that. It doesn't matter which breed we're talking a changeover for, whether it's standardbreds or thoroughbreds, that we can work towards that so that we know what the guidelines are for the turnover is going to be. And the other thing I want to address, Brett, is I did note, or we did note that we had some horses jumping shadows from the new light standards.
Mhm.
The guys were pretty vigilant in that, and they gave eye access to those horses. And other breaks were made, but they didn't appear to be because of being around the light standard or shadow. And guys are just going to have to make a point of jogging their horses over them more, or get a shadow roll on the horse, or a bigger shadow roll to deal with that. So part of that is equipment, and they'll it unfortunately they're just going to have to get used to those shadows from the new light standards.
Yeah, and unfortunately too, because we race in Alberta, because I did get some questions about, well, Saturday, could we move the post time later? You know, there's challenges with that because we already have so many events booked throughout the course of the summer. You're talking about, we did discuss that with Century, but it is, it's probably not feasible to where you'd have some Saturdays going at 12, some going at 6. It'd be a challenge. The other factor as well is, in Alberta, it doesn't get dark till late in the middle of the summer. So even if we started racing, we start racing at 6:15 on Wednesdays, with qualifiers before then, even if we push to 7, let's say, we're still going to be racing under sunlight, especially when we get to
Yes.
June and July until, you know, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So shadows are going to be a factor here. So I think it's just something that we have to, like Chuck said, to some degree, if you can use equipment or get them used to it. I know it's a challenge, but really, um, no matter what time we race, we'd be racing at the middle of the night, to try to avoid them. So it's just
And
something
you
we have to,
And you can't. There's
work around.
shadows at every track you go to.
Yeah.
It's impossible to. But we did, because they were new to the guy. For the guys there, with the placement of those lights, they did show leniency, and horses weren't put on the list for it.
Yeah.
They gave the guys IXs on I think 2 or 3 horses. So they were pretty vigilant in looking for that. But the guys moving forward, the trainers are just going to have to make sure they equip their horses properly.
Yeah. And yeah, I just want to go back to what Chuck had sort of spoken about too, in terms of, if you're not familiar with this, rules regarding operating a racino and a racetrack and whatnot. And that's what Chuck is referring to. There's a wide variety of standards that are going to get passed here, like a revamp of these rules that any racetrack operating in Alberta will have to sort of adhere to. And from that, there's sort of a matrix that says, in terms of like backstretch quality of the racetrack, which is very key, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's where Chuck is referencing. There's that whole sort of stepped process. So previously, like, if a driver goes and commits whipping violations, right? The first one, then it escalates to the second, then escalates to the third. We didn't have that, like Chuck said, with kind of holding an operator to account. Now that's going to go through. So these types of situations with track safety or anything like that, now there is that teeth to hold that to account. So, that's what we've got. We got to deal with it, but that's why also too it is important to make sure we have documentation of these things when they occur, when they happen, and why, and that's all we can do.
And I can tell you that Teresa, has been very frustrated over the years doing these inspections and stuff. She's very vigilant on seeing things that might do harm to a horse or a participant, and she picks up on those very, very quickly, and they go in that report. But like I said, unfortunately, we would then try to coax an operator into looking after things, and half the time it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is going to be a change, and I think for the good. Like I said, Teresa's very vigilant in doing these inspections, and a lot of time gets spent on them. So finally, we're going to be able to hold racetrack operators to account.
Perfect. I think we've got two more questions. This one is more so a comment I got in, not through the Q&A, but and it was just, Chuck, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I believe last year there was an uptick in out of competition testing, and I just don't, if you could just speak to that a little bit in terms of, I know that testing and out of competition testing has been a focus for our members, and maybe just HRA's stance on that from a regulatory standpoint.
Sure. Last year, 2024, we did three times what we did in 2023. I think in total we did about 157 out of competition testing. And just so you know, I'm not going to get into what all they test for, but there's a wide, variety of products that get tested for. I can tell you that I see the results of those out of competition testings coming back. And for the most part, all I seen was medications that trainers can legitimately use. They were there, but they're well within penalty guide or within the withdrawal guidelines, and they're legal to use. So, but what we do see through that is a little bit of the history of what's been going into some of the horses. Where we can act on those, is if we find a product that has no DIN for being used in a horse, or we send something we find unlabeled to the lab to test for, and it comes back, and again, it's something that's not for use in a horse, then that goes to class 1. That's a heavy suspension for somebody. So, we will try to be equal or better this year in out of competition testing. We'll be stepping up our going out to farms for our inspections and doing out of competition testing. Teresa and I are working closely on some of that right now. There are other things that I won't get into that we're looking at as well to hopefully deal with integrity issues from a testing standpoint for both thoroughbreds, standardbreds, and quarter horses. So I can't really give you a whole lot more about auto competition testing other than we're doing it. We did it at Track on 2 as well. We did TCO2 at Track on 2, and I'll be asking my commission vets to do some of that as well at Evergreen and Lethbridge as well. So we are stepping that up. And like I said, right now, I'm not seeing in that sense, because obviously it would be out there very quickly if we caught somebody using something that they shouldn't have been. So, but we do see a pretty wide variety of products that are being used, but they're all legal to use in a horse. So
Awesome. And I think this will be our last question that come through, and then we'll finish up. Affordable housing is a key negative for the industry. Can HRA or ASHA promote affordable housing on or near the racetrack? So definitely. I mean, we're a long ways away from where we were at with Northlands and Stampede, right? Where we had dorms on the track that really made a difference because it was affordable housing. We had more help available because there were living options. It's not really a reality now, right? I mean, this is just in general in terms of cost of living has risen, and now trying to find, places to live is challenging. And even discounted hotels, you're still paying way more than you used to in a dorm, for example.
yes.
So I do recognize this as an industry challenge. It's something we've spoken about as well with our thoroughbred counterparts in terms of, okay, like what options do we have? Like what could we look into to put some affordable housing near the tracks or around it, or look into, maybe is there some development opportunities and whatnot. So it's still very early stages to say like, oh, we're going to do this or this. But the one thing I will say is that both breeds, I guess I should say all three breeds, have recognized this as a challenge because it's not just standardbreds experiencing this, it is thoroughbreds as well. And so it, to me, my feel for it is this might be probably more of an HRA initiative that is supported by the associations, and something that might be something where we have to lobby government a little bit in terms of saying, here's our situation, but just the nature of how we operate, it's not, it it the dynamics of how we house grooms and whatnot, it's changed, and we need a little bit of support. So just to say we recognize it as a major issue, but it's still something that we have to work on. Obviously, like we're in the early stages. So
Yeah, I know I've heard some of the discussion around it, Brett, but not a lot. And Teresa, I think you can probably there is some support of if I'm not mistaken, for grooms.
They have subsidies for with ASHA and for the HVPA. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough yet. But I love to hear that Brett says that the associations are talking to each other, because there has to be a solution to this, and it's been an issue for a long time. But yeah, there is a subsidy that's given out by HRA for both breeds, moving from track to track.
And I know going back, Brett, many years ago before you were probably even born, when the tracks used to flip over so often between breeds, there was trainers and that for both breeds that they would, hey, I'll rent you my place, or you can stay at my place during your meet, and I'll take your place while I'm in Calgary or Edmonton type thing. And they used to do a lot of that. But you're right now to try to find affordable housing, especially for grooms, or anybody, but especially grooms, it's very difficult right now. It really is.
yeah, and the nature of where our tracks are too. So Century Mile is in Leduc, so there's not a ton of cheap housing available in Leduc. Whereas Northlands, you're right in this. And again, we had dorms and whatnot, but there's just more volume in terms of available housing at Northlands. And same kind of argument with Stampede. Now you're out by Balzac. Calgary itself, in terms of real estate, has just exploded, right, in terms of costs.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. It's not only our industry. I mean, this is a challenge as a whole, but those initial conversations with the thoroughbreds and specifically CTHS, in terms of maybe we've got some connections or contacts to look at maybe some even just developments of affordable housing. So it's something that we're aware of. And yeah, that's really all we could say. I just want to acknowledge that we do recognize that as a challenge for sure. So
And there's always the question of, can we do more? You know, I mean, we get that even at regulatory, you know, can you guys do more? Well, we're also limited by resources and money too. So, you know, you can only do so much. And right now, as HRA is rightfully moved towards building up the support for the industry and purses and breed improvement, that type of thing. Uh, you know, you're very close to, as you and Nancy both know, Brett, you're getting close to where we were 20 years ago for purses and stuff. So that's a big step forward. That's still not where we want to be, but it's a big step forward. And maybe as we get further along, then a lot more of this stuff can be addressed too, because everything costs money.
Exactly. So I think that's it for questions, and I have a hard cutoff here in a couple minutes anyways. So unless Nancy, Teresa, anything before we sign off?
I just want to reinforce the AGM is coming up quickly. We have a number of open positions, so think about it. If you want to make a difference and get involved, give me a call, put your name forward. And then I don't want to miss what Julie mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. You know, stay tuned. Backstretch benefits has been a priority for Horse Racing Alberta. They implemented the first phase of it last year. They made significant changes for this upcoming year, so stay tuned for that. I think that speaks to, the commitment that we have towards backstretch and quality of life. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And enjoyed being here.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Good luck
And
in your
yeah,
season. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.